All right, just gonna wait for everyone to join before we kick off. Hello, hello. Yes, now it's officially time to start. So I will wait a little bit longer. Talking to myself, that's always fun. Hello, everyone. Feel free to say hi in the comments. I can see everything you're saying. Alrighty. Hello, everyone. My name is Wallea Eaglehawk. I am the CEO of Revolutionaries, and this is Revolt Festa 2021. We are celebrating our very first birthday here today. But I'm not here talking about myself as CEO. If you want to learn more about our company and our vision and how it all came to be, you can tune into our summit tomorrow, or if you're watching this in the future, it is already a video up on YouTube. All right, just seeing that there is a bad connection. Can anyone confirm? Am I showing up? Am I lagging? This is Australia. Our internet is incredibly bad, I must admit. I think we're like 40th in the world. So if there's any problems, just let me know. If not, I am going to push through. Hello, everyone. Hi, yay, everyone's saying hello now. I'm so excited. All right. I'm just going to start, so let me know if there are any troubles, and I will try and fix them as we go along. Okay, so instead of talking to you about my work at Revolutionaries as CEO and editor-in-chief, I'm actually going to come to you today as a writer. So I'm going to talk to you about my creative identity, about limerence, and about BTS, which is actually quite a lot. So this might be a bit of a wild ride, but we'll just see how far we go. If you need any clarification, just pop your question in the comment box wherever you're watching from, and I will get to it. But first, before we get to that, this is very important because for those of you who don't know, I am in Australia. I am a white settler on stolen land. So this is customary in Australia to do this. So for everyone else watching, welcome. This is what we do. So I wish to acknowledge the Kabi Kabi people who are the traditional owners of the land which I am broadcasting to you from today. Their sovereignty was never ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And of course, I'm saying this because it's customary and I feel that it's only right to acknowledge the traditional landowners, but also we are nearing on our annual celebration of Australia Day, which openly rejoices the start of the dispossession and genocide of First Nations people. I feel this is a day of national shame, which I wish to openly condemn here. Further to this, I stand with the First Nations people of Australia, as well as all marginalised groups facing oppression under colonial, patriarchal and capitalist rule around the world. So there we go. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to tell a little bit of a backstory about me. We're going to go back in time 2 years ago, almost to the day. So around January 6, 2019, I was 25, worried about turning 30 any day. It seemed like I was aging rapidly. I had a successful business that I was operating for many years at that point, but all my life I had dreamed of being a writer, and I had pursued many different creative endeavors. I realized at this point in time, I wasn't just going to wake up with a best-selling book idea, get published and have a bestseller book straight away, unless I actually wrote the book first. So in my mind, I thought I would somehow go through like a series of blow-up montages where I'd wake up with an epiphany and write a best-selling book and, you know, suddenly I become the person I want to be. No, this was not the case. And the one main reason is that who I felt I was on the inside as a incredibly creative being was not exactly how I was living my life and displaying my persona on the outside. So that led me to realize many things at once, but for the purpose of this conversation, that I needed to build my own creative persona, or rather, I prefer putting it this way, integrate who I really was on the inside with what I'm actually doing out in the real world. So what is a creative persona? I define a creative persona as an identity which allows me to align my intentions of living my life as a creative with my daily actions, expressions, and experiences of identity. So really, I'm going to integrate who I want to be, who I call her Super Wall, the author, with who I am here and now. In order to do this, I must embody who I want to be instead of somehow becoming her the day that my book gets published. So every trait that I see Super Wall having in the future, every trait that a good author has, I actually have to take on board now in order to write the book to become who I really want to be. So that was the thing that I was really getting my head around. So amongst many different things like selling my business and having to find a new job, I realized that I had to figure out what I wanted to write a book about, because in order to get published, I needed something to be published. So this kind of already proved to be a dilemma for me, because I had two interests with writing. First, and my original love is writing fiction, because I could, as a young person, build worlds that I really wanted to live in, because I often struggled with not really being able to express myself or communicate who I am to other people. So I could live out these realities through my fictitious writing. The other passion that I soon came by, especially with the rise of MySpace when I was a teenager and blogging, was talking about myself and exploring who I am, which then even became more amplified when I went to university and got my degree in sociology. So I had these two passions, and at the time I was writing a book called Velvet 93, which still might come out, you never know. It was a fiction book, and I was, charging through it. Everything was fine, but it didn't feel quite right. This was because I had already started to revisit an old theory which I had been trying to develop for the past 7 years since my first university semester in 2012. So this was the crossroads that I was already at. And I'm going to explain to you a little bit about this theory that I then returned to and revisited when I decided to build my new life and my creative persona. So this theory is called limerence. In short, it is a love for love itself. Limerence is a cognitive and emotional state of loving adoration and attachment to another person. This was originally theorized by Dorothy Tenoff in her 1979 book, Love and Limerence, The Experience of Being in Love. So already at that point, 2019, that was 40 years old. So on the one hand, the really positive experience of limerence, euphoria, happiness, elation, of course, love, and intense personal transformation. On the other hand, the negatives are ruminative thinking, distress, depression, and anxiety. This is something that can often, and more typically than not, happen out of the control of the person who's experiencing it. What I had already found in my research since finding limerence in 2015 and all my questions that led me to find it the years prior was that limerence is what we are often sold as a true love narrative through the media. And also keeping in mind that the romance novel was the first form of mass media. So we have always been sold these ideas of a romance narrative in our life and our identity creation and expression. So think of things like Romeo and Juliet or any Jane Austen novel where these true love representations are often unrequited and all-consuming. So the reason why I was thinking about this and why I was originally interested in it is because I feel that my identity is love and that my identity expression is limerence. So Tenoff's limerence failed to encapsulate all that I felt, experienced, and observed. So I sought out further answers in a bid to create my own theory that built on limerence. This is because who I am seems to exist in direct relation to others, especially those who I draw inspiration from most, who are musicians. So even as a young person, I would be observing and consuming the content from musicians and adjusting my personality accordingly. Every time I saw something cool that I liked, I would adapt it and I would create it and I would turn it into my own. And this did not change the older I got. Through that, I also experienced an intense love relationship with these musicians, which was single-sided, which was very confusing as a young person and remains today to be quite boggling. The other thing I want to point out here is that limerence is often regarded as an incredibly negative state with serious psychological repercussions. Limerence is a psychological term. It's a psychological concept and theory and condition. But my background is sociology. So what I was searching for was something that could speak to the transformative power of limerence as an expression of love and identity, which I had already experienced in my life and observed with other people. So at this point, it was very interesting because not only was I starting to think about limerence again and how I could continue to build this theory, but also I was creating my new creative persona with the use of limerence. So one of the main components of limerence is that people fantasize a lot. They fantasize about this person that they are in love with. They plan their futures, they dream and scheme. This is also the same place that we go to create. This is the same place that we use our imaginations to think about what we want to eat next, the next conversation that we're going to have, what we're going to wear tomorrow. This is all the same place. So I was using my limerent fantasies and imagination to create my new persona by picturing who I want to be in the future and integrating it with who I am now. Limerence is highly creational and provides one with a great deal of inspired and motivated energy to rapidly transform. So this generally happens when we are rapidly transforming to be more appealing to that person that we love. This time around, I was trying to become more appealing to myself as an expression of self-love. So here you can see that I already have begun to defy the boundaries of a traditional understanding of limerence. Because in order to create this new persona, I had to become limerent towards myself, and that just wasn't included in Tenov's original theorizing. Here, as a sassy comment, I say, I guess when BTS said love yourself, they didn't quite see this happening. But here we are. So already things are happening in a very weird way for me in my life in 2019. And the theme seems to be limerence. But I didn't quite know how I was going to turn this into a book because I didn't have all the answers. I think at this point, I could very easily conceptualize what it's like to be a fan of an idol and be limerent towards them. But what was missing was that every celebrity and every group that I looked at didn't really hold up to all of my tests of theory. So I was waiting for the right group to come along, which interestingly happened when I was not looking for them at all. So after 7 years of searching for a celebrity or group to develop my theory of a new kind of limerence, I found BTS. I found their music video Idol, and as soon as I saw the word idol, that already sparked so many new ideas for me because in the West, we don't typically use that word a lot. Of course, we had American Idol, but even then I've never really used or seen the use of idol outside of South Korea. But as soon as I saw that, I totally got that what they were talking about, or what I hope they were talking about, was their idol persona. And that's when I started believing that perhaps I had found the missing piece. So here was a group that seemed to understand how their personas worked. And further, they were able to hold a tension with their competing selves and use this tension to create art. So here I'm already able to build out my theory a little bit more. Where limerence was single-sided, I also observed that idol limerence is multi-dimensional and a potent creational force in the lives of those who experience it. Because of this, limerence experience between an idol and a fan holds a great capacity for mass social change. So I'll explain this a little bit more. So of course, when in the original theorizing of limerence, this is experienced between just two people. One person has love feelings and the other person does not return them. Idol limerence, I believe, has love existing between both fan and idol, where the idol is creating content, sending it to the fan as a love product, also as an economic commodity. And the fan is responding with love and adoration by buying things, by streaming, by leaving comments, and creating fandoms. So already this is very different. But also, I believe this holds, idol limerence holds a great capacity for mass social change because limerence says that we want to transform ourselves and take on board the teachings of our limerent focus, our loved one, to make ourselves more desirable, but also because we are inspired to change to be a better person. So of course, in the instance of BTS and ARMY, it makes total sense. BTS have a global message of love yourself, speak yourself. So ARMY, who are limerent towards BTS, and anyone who watches on, of course, goes, that's a great idea. I think I'm going to take this on board because, of course, on the one hand, it's just great life advice. And on the other, it's a message directly from our limerent focus. So here, instead of just me engaging with BTS and deciding that I'm going to love myself to be more appealing to them, it's me and millions of ARMY and other people all around the world deciding to love ourselves because we know it's what's best for us, because that's what BTS have taught us and that's what we have observed with them. And already we are seeing social change happen on a very large scale. So I had some answers at this point, but what I really wanted to know was, do BTS know that they have these idol personas? Do they know that they are active in the creation and maintenance of these personas? So not long after I saw the Idol music video, a few months later, the music video for Persona dropped. So the day that I saw the music video for Persona was the day my creative identity, my life's work of theorizing a new kind of limerence, and my desire to write a book converged and found a new mirror. The promise of all that I had been looking for was promptly reflected back at me. So another really interesting point I just want to put here, and I'm sure many of you can relate, is that the more I learn about BTS, the more I learn about myself. Because in order to study BTS and in order to study ARMY, we are actually looking at a microcosm of humankind. So we're not just looking at individual experiences, we're actually looking at universal themes and collective experiences that we then can study and track throughout all of ARMY as they relate and resonate with BTS's message. So in the music video for Persona, I guess what I really learned, even just from the title again, was that yes, BTS are aware that these are highly created and maintained personas. Yes, they understand that it's complex, and yes, they are working with it to the best of their ability. So I was really able to start to rapidly build out my theory of Idol Limerence. And actually, it was on that day that I wrote the structure to what would become my first book. I will just give a little, oh yes, where is my camera? Yes, oh, here it is. Hello, there she is. So my identity had always been in response to those I drew inspiration from most. So it was only right that my first book would be in response to a music video that, in my mind, proved my theory of Idol Limerence to be true. So I hope I'm demonstrating so far that not only was I building a new creative persona, but the very task of integrating this persona included creating a book, which led me back to my original theorizing that I was kind of using to create my persona, but also led me to find BTS and on a very personal level enjoy them, but also on a professional life work level realize that all of my theorizing could actually become real. This is it seems very messy, and I guess it is, but it is an absolute intersection of personal and political, and it's like one big limerent ball at this point in time. So before we get to the next slide, this was about March and the start of April when I first came up with the structure for my book. Then came the hard part. I had to write the book. So in order to fully integrate this persona and to follow through on all the plans that I had made to change my life in order to become a published author, I had to write the book. I could start to see the structure. I knew I wanted it to be a book about BTS. But actually, this was the hardest part of all, facing my fears. It took me until, I'm going to say, December to actually sit down and write the book. And I had the mentality of do or die, and definitely cry, trying. Because I had waited all year, I had tried many different forms of writing. I had tried getting published in many different ways. At this point, I had already created Revolutionaries and Bulletproof as online publications where I could start to share my ideas. But apart from that, I was really struggling, feeling unseen and unheard. So instead of putting my efforts outwards, trying to build a platform and a name and a brand, I turned inwards and just said, screw it, I'm going to have to write this book because there's so many other things that I want to do. This is just the beginning, and I just have to get it done. So writing Idol Limerence, an encounter with my shadow self. So of course, we can't talk about persona without talking about shadow. And for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm just going to explain the shadow as everything that I've repressed, everything I don't see as fitting in with my persona, everything that I'm embarrassed or ashamed of that I push below the level of my own consciousness. And boy, did it come back to bite me. So that is the other thing we have to keep in mind when we are doing anything creative. As soon as we start tapping into how we're thinking and feeling, all of this is going to come back up. And we have to be ready for that stark encounter with everything we don't think is right about us, everything that we wish we didn't see in ourselves. So throughout the year, as part of this endeavor to be more creative, I had been saying yes to any opportunity that came my way. I ended up going on a national writer's residency in September of 2019, where I was tasked with writing a monologue. This was where I had my first encounter with my shadow self. My mentor really encouraged me to write a monologue based on my research and observation regarding Idol Limerence and the fan-idol interaction. Each time I brought a piece to him, he told me it was really great, but I needed to make it weirder. So he pushed me until I pushed myself past the brink of no return, and I became a totally different writer almost instantly. I had to learn that after a lifetime of writing myself as a fictitious character and making all the characters have my own morality, I had to learn that my characters and I don't have to have anything in common. So the character that I wrote in the monologue ended up becoming a manifestation of my shadow self. Everything that I saw in myself and in the ARMY fandom manifested onto the page, and I was terrified. But, I thought at the end of that, when I got on the plane and came home, I thought that part of my life was over. I was like, great, I saw my shadow self. She was all right. We made a cool monologue. I got to watch a 15-year-old girl read a monologue out loud about stalking a Korean idol. That's normal. That's fine. Great. Saw it, did it, got the postcard. Great. Got the t-shirt, got the mug. I'm done. But when I sat down to write Idol Limerence in December, I was expecting to come face to face with the idol. I was like, hello, RM, let's do this. Like, I'm going to see you, you're going to see me. We're going to make a book in my brain. Let's get this done. But instead I saw myself. So that was a great time. My shadow self never really went away. And what this consisted of was a lot of fear of failure, fear of getting it wrong, fear of being seen, fear of being limerent, fear of becoming a monster, which is what I definitely delved deep into with my monologue Like Butter, which, by the way, is in Idol Limerence if you want to read it. You definitely won't forget it after. So I had to throw myself into both worlds, so to speak, 10 points if you get the song reference here, and lean into my own madness in order to complete my persona transition. So everything that I saw in my shadow self, I had to learn to accept that this is a part of me, even if it's something that I've observed out in the world and really reacted to. This is now a part of me. I have two choices: totally reject it and go down a very deep and dark spiral and not get the book done, or I can lean into it and accept that there are a lot of parts of me that I don't like, and maybe I can just hold tension with them and use them and channel them into my character in my book as a way of working through them. So another part of this process that was really important was embracing my fan identity as an ARMY. And this was further part of a shadow self integration and my own creative rebirth. Throughout the writing of Idol Limerence, I was at odds with myself. There was a constant push and pull coming from within. I had not yet fully claimed the identity of ARMY, yet I was writing from the perspective of one. So of course, at the time that I first saw BTS, I was sold. And in my mind, I was an ARMY. But throughout all of 2019, I really struggled to find my place in fandom. So I would go through phases of saying to everyone, hey, I'm ARMY, and like nobody cared. So I still claimed that identity, but I didn't fully integrate it with everything I was, because the people around me were not supportive of it. And the ARMY that I interacted with didn't really feel like I fit in with their life, because I frankly didn't. So I was unsure exactly how to go about being an ARMY, especially because at the time I was really struggling with feeling seen with my writing. And I felt like it was one big competition between me and every ARMY that was writing about BTS. So I felt like I wasn't an ARMY in that respect, even though on the inside I definitely was one. So in order to fully integrate my shadow self, all that I feared I would become, I had to claim my title of Army. So there is a particular point in Idol Limerence where Echo, the main character, goes through this as well on the train tracks. It's very dramatic, but she does say, I am Army. We are one. I get that now. And that's then what went on. If you watch the previous panel with our book, I Am Army, that you'll know that that's what went on to spur the creation of the I Am Army collection of stories, where we document everyone's story of how they became an army. Also, I wanted to put here, I found this interesting when I was preparing my notes. Throughout this entire journey of writing Idol Limerence, I experienced my first creative death and rebirth. Though I experienced it non-linearly, integrating my army persona with my creative persona was a real turning point. So looking back, I just found it interesting that when I wanted to write about this part, I wanted to put in that I definitely had a creative death and rebirth. And when I was rehearsing yesterday, I made the joke that perhaps I was dead all along, and perhaps this was actually my first birth because it was my first full book. But definitely looking back, it feels like this part, the army part in particular, is what triggered the death and the rebirthing experience while I was integrating my shadow self. And it was absolutely a turning point, including some information on the next slide that all came towards the last quarter of writing the book. So I'd already been through a lot. I already wrote that chapter called Persona, which you all know who have read it. If you've read it, yeah, that's my favorite chapter. That was a lot of fun to write, but also that was incredibly difficult because that was the encounter with my shadow self, for sure. Even though the actual character Echo doesn't have the full encounter until much later on in the book. So, all right, where are we? I'm just ragging on. So yeah, it was just interesting that I looked back and I saw this particular part as part of my creative death and rebirth. And of course, I think the entire process was part of that rebirth as well. So it was very non-linear and present all the time and not present at all, because you know, life. All right, now for some more fun stuff. Make it about the royal we, all of us instead of just me. So through Persona, I am, therefore we are connected to BTS. So as I mentioned before, we create our personas in the same place, a limerent fantasy realm between the layers of our own psyches. Well, I don't have any confirmation that that's where we do it, but I had to say it somewhere, so I'm claiming it. So this is the same place that we create anything. This is a highly creational space. It's like a do-it-yourself little realm where you just imagine whatever you want to do and integrate it into your own life, or make a list and do a plan and get on with it. So this is also, therefore, the place that we can return to meet one another. This is where it gets a bit weird. Hang in there. Metaphysically, spiritually, and then quite literally, when we listen to music that has been co-created between BTS and ARMY, even if we weren't directly part of that process. So because BTS are creating music in this creational space, and this is also the space where BTS created their persona, where BTS created and first thought and dreamed about ARMY, where ARMY think about BTS, and where ARMY go when they listen to BTS music, it makes total sense that this is where we can all meet together. And of course, this is totally not backed up by science. I do believe that there are some things in the world that need to go unexplained. And this is just one way of understanding an experience that we can't quite put words to. And we all have our own ways of interpreting it. Also want to put here that BTS use their idol personas to communicate with ARMY and the rest of the world. Although we can agree and acknowledge that BTS's personas are very close to their private personas from everything that we've seen and heard, they are still, every time that they're operating as BTS, they are using these personas. And in Idol Limerence, I do write that these kind of start acting as a proxy. So even when they record a video as BTS with their personas, and when we watch the video, these are at two different times. So their persona starts to exist out of time and space, though very much being connected to time and space, and can go on to live in the hearts and minds of whoever is watching this video or listening to this song in perpetuity, forever. So this is how a persona can actually transcend the physical realm through technology. So this is how BTS communicate with ARMY and the rest of the world. But then the difference between ARMY and the rest of the world is that ARMY use limerence to meet and receive love in a way others can't quite understand through the fantasy realm, because this is where ARMY were created, this is where BTS were created, and this is where we are able to come together with that shared understanding through the collective unconscious. So if you'd like to know more about that, please read my book, because we don't have enough time to delve into it fully. All right, I'm going to start picking up pace so that we can have some time for questions if anyone has them. If you have any questions at this point, feel free to leave them. I can see them all on the screen. All right, creative symbiosis as dependent co-arising. So I'll explain this after I get through this first slide. I'll explain it on the second slide. So my persona transition and creative rebirth came in a non-linear way throughout the entire process of writing the book. What assisted me with this and gave me a language to understand it came from BTS themselves. So although this is what I have been experiencing my whole life, it wasn't really until I started observing BTS, watching their work, watching how they work with each other, that I started to develop a better understanding of what was happening to me. And I'm sure many of you can relate to this. Throughout the process of planning and then writing the book, I felt like I was working with BTS because I was taking guidance from their past work and finding synchronicities and resonance within my own. So all of their music, I definitely studied. I took out all the themes and I wrote it down and I turned them into metaphors in my own book. I took all of their learnings, and of course, as a fan, I was already absorbing this and taking it on board because BTS and my peers were the same age. We like the same things. I respect them. I appreciate them. I really look up to them, also because they are all taller than me. So already I was starting to integrate a lot of this into my own life, just like we do with any phenomenon we regularly interact with. But then I felt like I was working with BTS because I was using their work and incorporating it, interpreting it, and then channeling it, as well as all the work of ARMY and the rest of the world, into my book. While I was writing Idol Limerence in January 2020, Map of the Soul 7 was announced and then it was released in February. Through this entire process, which felt like we were both ramping up for a release at the same time, it felt like we were creating together because so much of what I had already written at that point then appeared in the reflections and work of BTS. Whew. All right, next slide. Despite all of this, the synchronicities only created further tension within me because I genuinely felt like I was writing a book with BTS. Though it is totally one-sided, BTS had no idea that I was writing this book, but I was definitely working with them. This belief led me to feel like I was alone and unhinged. Like, who could I talk to about this? Who could I say, oh, hey, I'm totally writing a book with BTS. It's like we're collaborating and stuff. But this was still just a further manifestation of my fears and shadows. So at this point, I was definitely having a real spiral, still feeling like the monster, still feeling like I was the worst for objectifying BTS by writing a book about them, by crossing over a boundary, by doing something wrong. And, you know, I must mention here that shadow work is never done. So although I said I did start to integrate my shadow self, I mean, there will always be things within my own subconscious that will rise to the surface depending on what is triggering it. So this just kind of perpetuated the experience. So at this low point, Ego was released. And for some reason, I mean, I totally love shadow. I can't even, in my next book, Return to Bangtan, as it currently stands, I do quite an analysis of what it felt like to be part of the collective when Shadow came out, because that was the first release in the comeback for Map of the Soul 7, of course, the first release of a new song for quite a long time. That holds a special place in my heart, but what I was not expecting was my reaction to Ego, which in stark contrast is a more of an upbeat, happy song. But I got way more emotional over it. So what I really got from that song, what I got from J-Hope, was him just saying, I should trust myself, saying to himself, I should just trust myself, as if that's what his ego is saying to him, or that he just needs to trust his ego. So I took that on board, and that was an absolute turning point for me as well. And that, once again, became part of the book where Echo, even though she was totally petrified of everything that she was experiencing, just said, hey, I'm going to be calm for 1 second, and I'm just going to trust myself. I'm going to trust everything I've been through. I'm going to trust that I'm a good person, and I'm going to trust that BTS are okay with what I'm doing, because we're all walking this path together and learning at the same time, and we're experiencing the same thing. So this experience really led me to start to understand that we are peers, and co-revolutionaries, which is very on brand for us here at Revolutionaries. We are walking the same path together and sharing our learnings to one another throughout art forms and online communications. This is creative symbiosis as dependent co-arising. So, a creative symbiosis. I feel that we are two different organisms working together and learning from one another in a beautiful creational way. And I also feel that, we are not all equal in this. And I think it would be a mistake. And I totally disagree with everyone who says that we are equals. We are not equals. This is capitalism. This is patriarchy. BTS are all men and the majority of their fan base is women. So it would be an absolute mistake to think that we as ARMY are equal to BTS. We have a very special relationship with them. They are not particularly trying to be patriarchal towards us, but that is the system, that is the structure that we exist in, and we cannot change it by thinking that we are equal. So instead, I want to put this as dependent co-arising. So this is my interpretation of it. This is a deep ecology concept. So how deep is your love? How deep is your ecology? Go hug a tree. Look it up. All right, so co-arising. So essentially, we are arising together, and we will only rise if everyone rises. So my rising is dependent on your arising, but we are not codependent. As long as we rise together like two tall trees in the forest, BTS and ARMY and everyone else in the world, we will continue to experience this creative symbiosis. And that's kind of what I mean by that concept. I could be a little bit wrong, and I will continue to hone it over time. Just kind of felt right when I was putting this together. So, co-creating with BTS, identity and relationship as art. Throughout my journey to becoming an ARMY and writing Idol Limerence, I started to co-create my identity with BTS, as you have gathered so far. I also believe this is not unique to me. I believe all of ARMY do this to some degree, just like we do with any phenomenon we regularly interact with. Building an identity through relationship with and in response to BTS is an art form. Interestingly, it is one which indeed creates art as an expression of its existence. I always want to say expression of its existence. An example of this would come from, think about all the different fan art we have throughout the fandom. This comes from an artist who goes, hey, I'm really resonating with BTS. I really like this theme. I want to paint something in yellow because that's my favorite color. I'm going to create something with them. I'm going to paint a picture of Hobie. And this is an expression of who I am right now and what I like. And then they put it out into the world. The very existence of that art piece is because of the relationship between BTS and ARMY, and how ARMY are integrating different elements of BTS with their experiences and with their identity. I also thought it was really important to put here that not only does BTS shape ARMY's identity in many ways, ARMY shapes the identity of BTS, and this one we all know as ARMY. There would be no BTS without ARMY and vice versa. But of course, everything that ARMY do, BTS know about, and in one way or another, whether it be spiritual or quite literally because they're looking at Twitter. And this definitely shapes the experiences of each member in a different way. So I want to loop this back a bit to Limerence here by saying where Limerence is typically single-sided, Idol Limerence, especially between BTS and ARMY, is symbiotic. So we're nearing the end of my presentation. I hope I've given some insight into how I've started to build my creative persona. And yes, for those of you who didn't know, I did end up publishing my book, and I also ended up with a publishing company, which is why I'm here. We are celebrating our first anniversary. So I wanted to build a persona that allowed me to live the creative life of my dreams. Limerence has been the expression of my identity my entire life. So I used it to create my new persona. What I didn't expect was that it would lead me to discover BTS and create my own social theory of Idol Limerence, which then became the subject of my first book. Through the conscious creation of my new persona, I encountered my shadow self and had to learn to trust my ego. As part of any creative process, I believe to some degree that some degree of shadow confrontation and integration is vital. especially in creating a sustainable creative practice that can last a lifetime. Integrating and co-creating with fear is truly a profound and terrifying experience, which was integral to my journey. My persona was created with limerence. This is the same limerence I then experienced towards BTS, which was the same limerence I used to co-create my theory of Idol Limerence with BTS and ARMY, which then became the same limerence I wrote about in my book, Harnessing My Limerent State. I asked for a creative identity, and instead what I got was a revolution, because what I believe is that every good revolution must start and end with a revolution of the self. All right, so that's kind of where we got up to. I hope it all came out right. I'd really tried to pack a lot in there. And also, I'm just putting this up on the screen. This came up when I was preparing for this presentation, but a lot of people want to know more about how I wrote my book and how to write a book. So next week, I'm putting on a masterclass. It's going to be live streamed just like this. I'm literally going to open up every single one of my files. There are many that I use to create Idol Limerence, everything that I planned with, all of my research, and show you exactly how I set it up and exactly how I wrote it and how I tracked all of my word counts and my progress in a spreadsheet. So if that sounds really interesting to you, I apologize if it doesn't. There is a link in the bio underneath the YouTube video and on Facebook. We will be promoting it on Revolutionaries, so follow us at revolt_TWT or me, Wallea Eaglehawk. And that will be kicking off next week. If you're watching this sometime in the future, it will already be a video on our YouTube channel. So let's just have a little bit of a moment, because I smashed out 40 minutes of talking very quickly. I thank you all so much for joining me. I can see all of your comments. I hope my connection wasn't too bad. If you have any questions, I will answer them now. Otherwise, we can start to wrap up. All right. Hello, Chanel. Thanks so much. I'm going to put this question up on the screen, but I'm going to take a drink of water. All right. Is there anything you regret about your journey through your shadow self? Or maybe something you wish someone had told you? I'm not really the kind of person that people can tell things to, in the sense, you can tell me anything, I don't mind. But if someone were to tell me anything about shadow self and shadow integration, I probably would have been like, that's cool, and then just done it myself and figured out the hard way. I do a lot better through observation and through conversation. That's how I learn. I had a really hard time at school because I don't actually like being directly taught stuff, unless I absolutely go sign up for a course, and then I'm of course very enthused about it. But I wouldn't sign up for a course about shadow self. I'd be like, whatever, I'll wait for BTS to release a song on it. Like, who cares, right? So I don't think I could have learnt any differently. I think I had to go through it myself, and I truly believe that each of us will have a different experience with our shadow self, and we all have a different language for understanding it as well. If there's anything I regret, every time I see regret, I'm reminded of that picture of the tattoo that says "no regrets," where regret is written wrong. And I think it's bloody hilarious. So is there anything I regret? I do look back, and I'm not regretful, but I am remorseful about how tortured I was. I really took on the mantle of a tortured writer and a tortured artist. I don't think I should have suffered as much over it. And my mum's always telling me, don't suffer over your suffering. And that is an absolute life lesson of mine. I could have made it a lot easier on myself by trusting myself at the start, but I didn't. And I think the most important lesson through this entire process, and it's just a massive life lesson in general, is that I should trust myself, because I often feel like through everything I observe in the world, I get further and further away from who I am. I think, oh no, I'm a terrible person because this Twitter feed is trying to call some other person out on this thing, and maybe I did it too. So I get further and further away from who I am through observing other people, which can sometimes be a mistake. I've got to protect myself a little bit more. And then I start to panic by going, maybe I am a bad person. Maybe I am doing this wrong. Maybe this Twitter thread is about me because I'm a white person and white people suck. Oh my goodness, I'm not doing enough. And of course, I think to some degree, we all need to be looking at ourselves and constantly reflecting and being willing to change. But I also have to remember that I've got to trust myself and that my foundations are very solid, and I'm not suddenly going to become a terrible person overnight by mistakes. So yeah, I think if I could do anything differently, I would just trust myself from the start and be like, hey, you're writing a really great book, just trust it. And whatever, like, no one's going to buy it anyway, right? So we'll be fine. Well, that's what I was telling myself. And then here we are, people are reading it. Just trust yourself. All right, thank you, Chanel. Hello, Manolin Gamapis. What advice would you give someone only at the very beginning of their journey with becoming self-aware and facing their persona, shadow self, and ego? I think if you don't know where to start, pick up a book and read it, or find a YouTube video, find a podcast, whatever way you learn the most, have a conversation with someone. I think even listening to BTS's music and actually finding, if you don't speak Korean, finding the translations and really understanding finding your own interpretation of what they're trying to say could be useful. I think you've got to be prepared for it to be a never-ending journey. This doesn't stop. You don't just go, oh yes, I met my shadow self. She was great. Got the t-shirt, got the mug. Fantastic. I'm back now. Here I am. It never stops. So I think do your research, become really familiar with what these concepts are, and start to analyze and reflect how they manifest in your life and how you currently work with them. A fantastic way to do this is by journaling. If you don't regularly journal, I suggest, first of all, I don't know if you have a daily routine, write a daily routine down, try and stick to it for a week, see what happens, and make sure you journal at the start of it every day or at the end of every day, and just say something. And over time, start trying to identify key themes in your life, and try and unpack what your persona is, what your shadow is, and what on earth an ego is. Because, I mean, the ego is the strongest of all and something that I still can't quite get my head around. But of course, I am my ego, and I've just got to learn to trust that. So yeah, I think definitely self-reflect, but don't be too hard on yourself either. Like, live your life. Don't fall into the habit of always reflecting, always critiquing, always journaling, always trying to better yourself. You have to go out and live your life and make mistakes. There is no way to get around it. And that's my advice. All right, another question. Okay, can you comment on how finding a group of like-minded and like-hearted people who work with you at Revolutionaries has influenced you, and how the development of Revolutionaries is happening? Well, thank you, Deanne. All right. I think, and we'll touch on this more tomorrow at the summit. Please come along. But I'll talk about it briefly now. I think the best part about 2020 was finding my team of people that I work with at Revolutionaries making books, but also the broader community of revolutionaries who support us. Oh, where's my head? I think how it's influenced me. Oh my goodness. I think the most important part is that it has stabilized me. When I was writing Idol Limerence, I was incredibly alone and disconnected from ARMY and everything else in my life, because I was in this in-between state of absorbing myself in the world of BTS, but not actually being a part of ARMY. And that made it hard for me to live my life in other realms, like at my gym where I'm powerlifting all the time. Hello, Chanel, you are from my gym. We powerlift together. You are watching this right now. It made it really hard for me to interact in those situations, because in my headphones was BTS and everyone else is listening to, on the speakers is death metal and everyone's grunting and doing stuff. And I'm here in this fantasy state writing a book while trying to deadlift. These things kind of clash because I haven't fully integrated my personas. So definitely in 2020, finding the right people really helped me find my place in fandom, and helped me realize that I am okay, I am myself, and I should trust myself because I'm surrounded by people who trust me and people that I can learn from and grow with together. So I would not be the person I am today without my team. So thank you very much. Without everyone else who engages with us as revolutionaries and all of my ARMY friends and family. It has rapidly transformed Revolutionaries, and all of the thoughts that have just been in my head that I have been so full of doubt around and so fearful of now have a channel to come out. We have a group chat. I can float ideas anytime and say, hey, what do you think of me doing a masterclass next week? And then everyone replies, you're a genius. We love you. And, it's not an ego fest. That's a joke. All right, everyone calm down. But, it is a way that I can really find my place in the world. And that is what is really important to me, and what I'm really grateful for, and definitely has shaped my entire company. Okay, everyone, if that's it for questions, I'm going to go get ready for Aurora's panel now. Hello, Aurora. Madeline, all right, final last words. Your team sounds so cool. I want to hang out with them. Well, fancy that. Madeline Gamappas is our communications director. You can catch her presentation in approximately 1 hour's time, 1 hour and 10 minutes time. So yes, you can come hang out with the team all weekend long at Festa, and please support us. If you want to know anything more, please send me a message on Instagram or Twitter. My handle is the same. You can send me an email. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this all made sense. I'll be asking for feedback from some of you afterwards. And thank you so much. I look forward to doing this again next week when I will be going through how I wrote my book. I better go remember. All right, everyone. I'm going to end the broadcast now. Take care wherever you are in the world, and remember to trust yourself. You're on the right path. And support Revolution.